Hey everyone, welcome back. Thanks for joining us. Today we've got a brand new story to share with you. So let's begin. Today, the story I'm about to tell you will leave you shocked, and perhaps even angry at the girl involved. This is the story of a man who worked tirelessly for his family, unaware that the very person he was sacrificing everything for would betray him in the worst possible way. His entire world changed in an instant. Vijay and Annie's love story. Vijay, a hardworking 30-year-old man from a small village, had always dreamed of a better future. To fulfill his ambitions, he decided to pursue a degree in software engineering in the city. His goal was to achieve great success and bring pride to his family. Vijay was so deeply engrossed in his studies that he hardly paid attention to anything else. But everything changed the day he met Annie. Annie, a 29-year-old beautiful young woman, had recently joined the same college as Vijay. From the moment she stepped onto the campus, she captured everyone's attention. Every guy turned to look at her, and among them was Vijay. The moment he laid eyes on her, he was captivated. But despite his admiration, he lacked the courage to approach her. Vijay was not just brilliant in academics, he was also good at sports. However, he had devoted his entire life to his studies, leaving no room for friendships or distractions. This resulted in him having very few friends in college. On the other hand, Annie, despite her beauty, struggled with academics. When Annie learned that Vijay was one of the smartest students in college, she decided to seek his help. The next morning, while Vijay was studying in the college park, Annie approached him and sat beside him. Seeing her so close, Vijay's heart started pounding. He had never imagined that the very girl he admired from a distance would approach him first. With a bright smile, Annie said, "Hi, I'm Annie." Vijay, speaking softly, replied, "Hello, I'm Vijay." Annie chuckled and said, "I know, you're the smartest guy in our class." Vijay smiled shyly and said, "Thank you. Do you need help with something?" Annie playfully dismissed the idea of help and said, "Let's be friends first, then we'll talk about help later." Hearing this, Vijay's happiness knew no bounds. Without a second thought, he agreed to be friends. This was the first real friendship of his life, and that too with the most beautiful girl in college. Many guys in the college couldn't hide their jealousy. As time passed, Vijay and Annie's friendship deepened. Annie started spending most of her time with Vijay, and slowly Vijay fell for her. To him, Annie was special, but he had never confessed his feelings to her. One evening, while walking home from college, Vijay finally gathered the courage to ask, "Do you have a boyfriend?" Without hesitation, Annie smiled and said, "No, I don't have a boyfriend." Hearing this, a smile spread across Vijay's face. But would this love story remain so perfect? Did Annie feel the same way about Vijay? Or was a storm about to hit Vijay's life and destroy everything? Stay tuned with Betrayed and Broken to find out. Vijay and Annie's story had now taken a new turn. Annie never imagined that Vijay would propose to her in such a unique way. When he stood her in front of a mirror and told her that his girlfriend was the girl in the reflection, Annie was left speechless. It was the most unexpected yet heartwarming way of expressing love. Her face first showed surprise, then bloomed with happiness. She couldn't stop herself and immediately accepted Vijay's proposal. They had a grand wedding and embarked on a new journey together. At first, everything seemed perfect. Vijay and Annie spent their days laughing, teasing, and enjoying each other's company. However, as time passed, responsibilities started weighing heavily on Vijay. After marriage, he had to work harder, and it became difficult for him to focus on his studies. Eventually, he made a tough decision. He dropped out of college to focus on earning money for their future. Initially, Annie understood his sacrifice, but as time went by, she began to feel that Vijay was no longer the same. He was often exhausted and irritable. 4 to 5 months passed this way. One day, while returning from college, Annie noticed a wealthy young man sitting in an expensive car, looking in her direction. She ignored him, but this became a daily occurrence. Every day, he tried to grab her attention with gestures and smiles, but she always chose to overlook him. One evening, when Annie returned home, She found the house in complete disarray. Vijay was sitting there, his face dark with frustration. "What is all this? Why does the house look like this?" Annie asked, confused. Vijay, his voice filled with frustration, replied, "I lost my job. I don't know what to do anymore." Saying this, he stormed out of the house, leaving Annie standing there, stunned. She quietly cleaned up the mess, but her mind was restless. Thoughts of that rich stranger began to creep into her head. Why did he suddenly seem so attractive? Was it his wealth that intrigued her? The idea unsettled her. The next day, as Annie was leaving college, the same man suddenly stepped in front of her. "I love you," he said without hesitation. "Ever since I saw you, I can't stop thinking about you." Saying this, he handed her a small piece of paper with his phone number on it before walking away. Annie quickly hid the paper, making sure Vijay wouldn't see it. Annie was now trapped in a strange dilemma. Vijay had neither money nor a job, and he was constantly burdened with worries. On the other hand, this rich young man, Preet, was showing her dreams of a luxurious life. Annie began to wonder if marrying Vijay had been a mistake. She started talking to Preet secretly on the phone while in college and began spending time with him. Meanwhile, Vijay was working tirelessly for his family and his beloved Annie. He wanted to ensure she never faced any difficulties and that she could continue her studies without trouble. However, he had no idea that Annie's heart had already started beating for someone else. As time passed, Annie and Preet grew closer. Their relationship deepened to the point where they crossed all boundaries, unable to imagine a life without each other. On the other hand, Vijay worked even harder, hoping to build a better future for Annie. But he was completely unaware that there was no longer a place for him in Annie's heart. One day, while returning from work, Vijay saw Annie stepping out of a hotel with Preet. They were so close that anyone could tell they were romantically involved. Vijay stood there, stunned. He gathered himself and, without making a scene, quietly recorded a video of them together. Back home, Vijay waited for Annie to return. The moment she walked in, he confronted her directly. But instead of telling the truth, Annie started making up lies. Vijay, now furious, played the video in front of her. The sight of undeniable proof left Annie in shock. She realized there was no point in hiding the truth anymore and admitted everything. Enraged, Vijay gave her an ultimatum. She had until the next morning to leave his house. However, he had no idea that Annie had something else in mind. That night, after Vijay fell asleep, Annie called Preet and asked him to come over immediately. Within moments, Preet arrived at Vijay's house. Together, they launched a brutal attack on the sleeping Vijay. He fought back with all his strength, but he was powerless against both of them. Consumed by rage, Annie did the unthinkable. She killed her own husband. Vijay's lifeless body lay on the floor, drenched in blood. But Annie's fury didn't stop there. She stuffed Vijay's body into a large drum, filled it with cement, and hid it where no one could find it. With no remorse, she and Preet fled the city, hoping to start a new life together. However, fate had other plans. Preet had only used Annie for his own benefit. Once she was no longer useful to him, he abandoned her in a hotel and disappeared without a trace. Now, Annie had no one left. Realizing the enormity of her crime, she returned to her family, sobbing, and confessed everything. Her parents, horrified by her actions, immediately called the police, leading to her arrest. In court, Annie received the harshest punishment for her unforgivable crime. Now, locked inside the dark confines of a prison cell, she was left with nothing but regret. She had lost a devoted husband like Vijay and was left with nothing but guilt and an irreversible fate. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.